Hello, my name is Daniel Hill and welcome to a series of videos on chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia and ME, myalgic encephalitis, or however it's called. I could never work out exactly or remember what it is. I'm now working as a therapist, coach and mentor, and have been doing for 11 and a half years since qualifying all the way back in 2006 at the Optimum Health Clinic which was then on Harley Street in London, and that was set up by Alex Howard, who co-invented the lightning process with Phil Parker. And my journey at that point, when I first came to see Alex after reading his book in 2005, I had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in 1991 when I was 16 coming up 17 that year. I was an incredibly athletic, energetic, positive individual who was training and to become a very high performance athlete. Wasn't that academic at school, but with them, when I got glandular fever when I was 15, at the turn of when I came 16, it absolutely just shook my world. And at that age, I wanted to go to the Olympics, and I was very, very talented. I was very fortunate, but I was a runner, and my 800-meter time when I was 15 years old was 3 seconds off the women's world record. And that was most likely set by an East European who was on drugs. So 15 years old, I could have beaten almost any woman on the planet. And I wasn't training at a athletic club. I was at Hales Owen Athletic and Cycling Club, which meant we did a lot of road running. It now has a track, actually has some tartan, like a athletic track that's only 300 metres. Back then, that was all the infield was just grass, and we ran on a bank, like a cycling bank, which was made out of tarmac, and that's not really the best. And I went out training on the roads, and I remember from the age of 10 years old, I was out running on the roads of Hales Owen, which is just south of Birmingham in England. And I remember getting lost once and being terrified. But that was my goal. So I was a guy who had energy. I was a young lad who had energy. And I didn't know what it was like to be that ill. And when I got glandular fever, it totally and utterly debilitated me. And I was bedbound for months and months. And whenever I pushed myself, I could never push myself to the same extreme without my glands coming up, getting a fever. And this was persistent for 5 years, and effectively I had to write off my running career because I could never push myself to that level again where I used to train and push my body beyond its limits. And they kept saying to me, well, you just need to rest, and these things resolve themselves in time. And the reality was that my environment that I was living in at home was very stressful with my parents. It had there was a lot of emotional issues. I didn't feel loved. It was very frightening. My father had used a riding crop in order to discipline us. That had stopped by when I was 16, but the thought that it might still be there was there. And at the point of when I got glandular fever, I had 3 separate incidents which made my belief about the outside world being a very scary and horrible place. I'll take you back to when I was 13, when a paper boy called Stuart Goff was abducted, sexually molested, and beaten to death with a rock. That was massive news. If you're watching these videos and you're in the UK, you remember what the Soham murders was like when Ian Huntley took those 2 girls and did a sort of similar kind of thing. It was as big as that in 1988. I remember it got read out on the news. Anyway, within 6 months, I was doing his paper round, and I got followed. That led to a speech impediment. That led to me developing an anxiety disorder. And there was nothing too much in it. They'd caught the guy, or actually he'd handed himself in, Victor Miller. He's now out, I believe. And ironically, Stuart's buried not far from my father now, or my father was buried after he died, was killed. And so the guy who followed me was just somebody who just wanted to frighten the life out of me. I got a police escort and I got a rape alarm, and I lost the rape alarm. I remember a juggernaut ran over it as it fell out of my pocket. I then carried on developing more and more anxiety, but carrying on and pushing, doing athletics. The following year, I was very fortunate to live in a middle-class kind of background, and I was playing football in the back garden, and my father had these great big security lights put in that were turned on by movement. That was quite a cool thing back in 1989 when that would have happened. And I was able to play out in the garden. We had a nice big garden, and I played outside with a ball and a football net, not a full-size one, but sort of something like for 14, 15-year-olds to use. I was 14 at the time. And I heard some rustling in the hedge, and I went down to the bottom thinking there's a big animal there, and it was actually a burglar. And he'd been spying on me for quite a while, because I kept hearing this rustling for quite a few minutes. I kept looking, couldn't see anything. And I sprinted up to the house, slammed the back door. I remember screaming at my father that there was somebody there. I got chastised for it, told off for it, that I could have broken the back door and all this kind of stuff. And my dad kind of looked out the window. He couldn't see anything, went down, didn't say anything, and I was in trouble for what I did. The following day, all the police were there. I came back from school, and this guy had been burgling all the sheds and taking things out of people's sheds, lawn mowers and all the rest of it. Again, that furthered my belief of it's not safe in the outside world. And then the big one was I always looked older for my age, because I was kind of hairy and quite muscly, because that's what I was training. I'd been doing athletics from the age of 10, and I built up big muscles. And age 15, I looked older than I did, but I was out wearing tight lycra cycling shorts, or athletic shorts, with shorts over the top, I believe, and then a t-shirt. And I was followed to my door from what I now know was a paedophile. And he'd found me while I was doing a 10-mile run over somewhere called the Clent Hills, which is where I live, not south of Birmingham. And I thought that he was an athletics coach. He must have spied me and thought I was, my God, this lad runs fast. Of which I did, except this guy hunted me like a shark. And found out and saw where I lived. I ran back home, and he followed me. He kept passing and then going back the other way. And my logical brain was saying he's an athletics coach. Part of my fearful brain was going, this might be dangerous. And he found out where I lived. And again, my parents didn't really react. My mother came to the back door, kind of went, well, what's he want? And it was like, I couldn't understand why they wouldn't run out and attempt to help me and to protect me, and they weren't doing that. My dad never even got up from the football. It was the summer of the World Cup in 1990, and he never even got up. I remember that, and I had to do a lot of therapy in years later to forgive him on that one. And I ran away from home the next night, and that started depression. I'd never been depressed in my life, and I started feeling depressed for the first time in my life because I realised I made I made the decision that my parents didn't love me. If they weren't prepared to protect me from an ongoing threat and a danger that's out there, then I'm not wanted, I'm not loved. And I remember I ran away from home and I slept out on the Clent Hills, which terrified the life out of me because the fog came down, or the cloud came down late at night, and then here I was attempting to get attention from my parents, thinking, where's he gone? I was only 15 at the time, coming up 16, and I wanted them to really make a big deal out of the fact that that I meant something to them. And the reality was I eventually found my way off the hills and went to a friend's house, and the friend's father took me back. I lied and said I got really tired and lay down on a bench and fell asleep there, and when I woke up it was dark. My parents didn't even know I was missing. I came back at 10:30 at night. They didn't even know I was missing. I was one of 4 kids, and it was a very dysfunctional household. And people used to cry wolf, make big drama in order to get attention, and I didn't. And when the actual threats occurred and I made a scene, I was not believed, and it gave me a lot of issues. So why have I told you all that regarding chronic fatigue syndrome? Because I've now been doing this job for 11.5 years. I've seen a couple of thousand clients. I deliberately stayed away from chronic fatigue syndrome when I got qualified because I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. I'd spent my life attempting to recover from it, and it was an away from thing. I want to get away from chronic fatigue syndrome. I want to get away from ME, and I didn't want fibromyalgia, and I had loads of other autoimmune problems as well. So I mean, I didn't just have classic, the classic ME in many ways. I had so many other things that were going wrong with me. What I noticed was when I started doing my training at the Optimum Health Clinic that there were other stories like this: dysfunctional childhoods, not always, but problems with parents, not feeling safe, traumas, dysfunction, and I started to realise that emotionally, that there's massive amounts of stuff that you can do to work on yourself in order to heal. Now, at that point, when I was training, when I was 30 years old, I had been working as a window cleaner for 6 years part-time because what I qualified in leisure management I couldn't do. I spent 4 years training in leisure management and lasted 4 days. I couldn't deal with the stress of it. I got all my symptoms. I managed through college, just about. My health was intermittent. But as soon as I was up to doing work, it just absolutely floored me, and I got really ill, bedridden within about a week, just chronically ill. And then, right, I'm going to have to take another sabbatical. I'd taken one before when I was at college. I took a complete year out, trying to find out what the answer was and paying lots of money to various people. So by the time I got to the Optimum Health Clinic, I was 31, coming up 32. I went in May 2006. In November 2004, I'd attempted to take my life because in the summer of 2004, my health got the worst that it ever was. I was able to do just about, people think window cleaning, wow, that's really hard work if you've got ME. I really always just took my time. I meditated a lot. I'd done so much work on myself to be able to get the job in the first place because I was age 24 when I started doing it. I really knew that staying at home not doing anything was really bad for me. And I was having acupuncture at the time, and the acupuncturist knew that there was an emotional correlation. And he was actually a former GP, and he turned to become an acupuncturist and gone down the holistic route. And I saw his professor, because he was only getting so far with me, and the professor said I needed to drink more water and to walk. And I paid £120 back in 1997 for this advice, which I thought was preposterous. And he was with me for 10, 12 minutes, if that. But actually, it worked. I wasn't able to work again, but I went from being struggling to get out of bed some days to starting to feel sort of more well. And I only used to walk gently, and it was better for me to be outside. I saw life. I would walk around town. I'd walk in the countryside, and I would have more fluids. And I started to get more well. And it was while I was walking that I actually saw my mum's old window cleaner, and I just went, kind of popped in my head, and I went, my God, maybe I could do that for a little bit. Maybe I could just, even if it was just one small house a week or something like that. And I was getting benefits at that time. I was on, I think, because they'd said they'd found nothing wrong with me. I was always given I don't know. It was we've done blood tests and we can't find out there's nothing wrong with you. And so that would always lead you to believe that you're insane, you're making it up, even though that you weren't. That was half the battle sometimes as well. Telling people you're really ill and them not believing you. And I needed to have some support. So I had an older girlfriend when I was 24. She was 10 years older, kind of a mother figure really to me. And not that I knew that at the time, or she knew that, but it was true. And she did support me in doing that. And I remember even just going round seeing the window cleaning clients the first time I went round. I had such a panic attack, it put me in bed for about 2 or 3 days. I was having counselling at the time. I was seeing a French lady, and she was helping me through sort of the fears and various things, but I was just so fearful beyond you could possibly imagine. I was okay up heights, weirdly, so I could climb a ladder. I wasn't brilliant up heights, but I could do it. And there was kind of like an intuition inside of me, and I learned to trust that intuition to guide me. People talk about the inner healer being within, and I started to listen to that a lot more. And the inner healer or the guidance was saying, you can do this, even if it's just part-time, and just start really, really small. And I did, and I remember cleaning the windows inside and out of my girlfriend's where she was renting, and the panic attacks that I got just from doing that, which floored me in my energy, because I had to do it right. There was an absolute terror of not getting it right. And if they wouldn't pay me, and what if they got angry? And I don't know. I was thinking every kind of worst case scenario you could possibly imagine. And every window had to be absolutely spotless. If you're doing inside and out. And what would take? I remember telling the window cleaner who helped start me up, bless him, how long it took me to do my first house, and it just made him laugh because he'd whiz over it in sort of like 10 minutes, and there'd be me like 2 hours later, like getting every little mark possible, and he just found it funny. So by the time I'm 30, I'm moving around all over the place here, and anyway, by the time I was 30, I was supporting myself solely by window cleaning. I could never do it full time like other people could do. I could never understand why I'd got these constant pains in my body, in my legs, in my back. I would have to work a day and the next day completely and utterly rest. And when I say work for the day, it wasn't working like somebody else. I could manage to do something like 6 hours and pace myself. Everything was about pacing myself, managing the energy. And I caught a virus. I got a mortgage on a small flat, this flat actually. Excuse me. And I got a mortgage on it and bought it because I was terrified of not getting on the housing ladder, and I was just renting a room in somebody's house for years. And the stress of getting a mortgage and all the other payments that go with that, led the stress to increase even more. I remember I couldn't sleep at night. The pains in my body were just getting worse. I was having to work harder. I felt trapped. I didn't know how to get out of what I'd got, but I felt I was damned if I do, damned if I don't. And I caught a virus, and I didn't recover from the virus, whatever that virus was. Again, they did tests, never found anything, but my body massively overreacted to it. I woke up one morning and the whites of my eyes were red. I developed something called iritis overnight, which is where the whites of your eyes just swell and become very, very red. And my uncle, professor of ophthalmology, now retired, said you have to take steroids whenever you get that, and you'll have that for the rest of your life now. And he said if you don't take the steroids and reduce the inflammation, the retina could get detached from the back of your eye, meaning you will have damage, either permanent loss to your sight or just a loss of vision, perhaps on some level. I'd also developed arthritis overnight. I developed something called reactive arthritis or writer's syndrome. That was on top of having ME, fibromyalgia, and and a dysfunctional past. So, which I was still kind of working through, still having some counselling, although I was seeing a lady up here in the area where I live in the Midlands rather than going down to visit her in Cheltenham, the French lady, who was very, very good, although I've advanced much further in the fact that I use other tools these days other than counselling. I actually trained in counselling in 2001 and realised it wasn't powerful enough for me, and hence I qualified in all of this years later. In the summer of 2004, this reactive arthritis got me. It affected me all the way down the left-hand side of my body massively. My hands, even though I did have some problems on the right-hand side, my hands, let's work on the left-hand side first. So my hand became an absolute claw. There was nothing, I couldn't open it or whatever. The arthritis just came completely over there. My knee, my left knee, was twice the size. I remember them draining it a number of times. All of my toes swelled up. This hand was a little bit affected as well, but the toes on my right foot were affected. My jaw was affected, so I couldn't really quite speak. My shoulder was affected. It was like having a stroke almost down the left-hand side of my body. Asking questions, what's wrong with me? We don't know. Other than giving me eventually this diagnosis of Reiter's syndrome, reactive arthritis. And I knew there was a correlation between what I'd got and what I'd been suffering with over the years, this chronic fatigue syndrome. This autoimmune disease I'd got, I knew was correlated. And I was having doctors telling me, no, there's no correlation. And I know now that there is. Basically, when you're running that much fear, when you've got chronic fatigue syndrome, and I'm jumping ahead of myself slightly because I will go on and talk about it much further. But when you've got a disease and unease, and by now I've treated so many different kinds of people with different illnesses over the years who've come to see me. Some have made complete recovery, some have got a little bit better. It's all down to the individual and how much they want to keep working with me. Because when you're recovering from serious disease, it's going to take a long time, most usually, because you're coming out of serious unease, serious fears. And you need to create more happiness in your life and less seriousness. It takes a long, long time, and it took me a long, long, long time. So, hence, I'm now finally, aged 43, having once qualified at the clinic, starting to study at the clinic when I was 31. I now feel ready to do it. I actually had a client today in Austria who's got ME, and she found me. And we've done 4 sessions in the last 4 months, and she's got another one on her package, and she's going to stay with me after that as well and have sessions every 2 months or so, 2 to 3 months when she can afford it. And she's got better. Not fully recovered, but she's got better, and she's understanding her psychology and understanding the illness and everything else. So back to my history. When I was really ill in a hospital, I was on a ward with people with autoimmune disease, other people with reactive arthritis, other people with lupus. There was a guy, I was in for a month, I was bedridden for a month, and I was very lost, I was very low. My mum was in a new relationship after my father had died only 2 years before. Again, there's a correlation there with loss. And and also my sister's boyfriend had been killed, and I was very close to him. He was killed in a car crash that wasn't his fault. And there was a whole stacking of all this emotional stuff, and it was like when I got ill, it was just like, it was like the car crash. It forced me to stop. And it was a horrible, horrible time and a horrible, horrible place. But I realised the most necessary thing that needed to happen in order for me to get a deeper sense of healing and get on the right path for healing and to actually do this job, get to do what I do now. But in order for me to be able to get to sleep, because this guy next to me who'd got lupus so badly, he'd got no arms and legs, and snored terribly, I asked for a sleeping tablet. And normally, over the years, I was never able to take any kind of medication. They put me originally on sertraline, which is an antidepressant. I never asked what it was at 16. They just said, well, we've done studies in New Zealand, and people who took this drug got better from, high percentage got better from chronic fatigue syndrome. And I just took it without reading what it was. I'm sure my mum probably read what it was, but I didn't. I was a kid. I was like 16, and I wasn't really taking that much responsibility for myself, and just wanted to take it and then have another Mars bar, and then hopefully I'm going to get better. So I couldn't take any kind of drugs, but I asked for a sleeping tablet because I was so poorly and I needed to get to sleep. And when you're in a hospital ward and somebody's snoring next to you, and you know, I felt on some level that I could be losing parts of my body at some point. I thought that I didn't know how much worse I was going to get, because my whole life had just been from 16 just getting lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And I took a sleeping tablet, took one, and I had a horrible taste in my mouth the next day, and I vowed to never have another one. But of course, she came round, one of the nurses came round in the evening, and they gave me another sleeping tablet, and I put it in my bedside drawer, put a tissue around it, and I was there for the next 2 weeks. And I actually went throughout the night with little sleep, but would rather do that than take the sleeping tablet, because I thought it was, you know, I knew my liver would have to process that, and I was taking antibiotics because I refused them originally, and eventually I said okay, and I saved up my sleeping tablets, and when I left hospital I actually had 15 or 16. They didn't know this. It's actually we're actually the 1st of November today, and it was just after my grandfather died. It wasn't so much that I was close to him, it was the fact that I was jealous. When I saw him when he died, when he was close to death, and then I went back in the hospital, saw him when he died, I saw the peace that he was in, and I longed for that peace, and I just didn't know what was wrong with me. I was back out cleaning windows about 2 days a week, as much as I could, in order to pay the bills. I wasn't getting any support from the state, because whenever I tried to attempt to get any money from the state, there would be, well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you, you're completely well. Back to that old pattern. It was just round and round and round. You know, I needed help, but I asked for help and it wasn't there, and then I was just getting lower and lower, and I remember I couldn't even take the time off to go and see my grandfather in the Chapel of Rest, because I had to earn money, and I could only clean windows when the weather was partly good, and this was early November 2004, so this will be coming up to the 13-year anniversary of me nearly taking my life. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. If you've got ME, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Any kind of illness, you'll know, you just get so fucking sick of being sick and tired, because everything that you do, you go to doctors, you go do this. You know, I'd seen like 50 practitioners at the time. I'd spent money that I didn't really have. I managed to beg, borrow and steal. No, I didn't steal. But you know what I mean. I literally managed to get by somehow in order to be able to get to the next appointment or see the next thing, or the next, you know, it was always like the next thing's going to heal me, the next thing. And it was always, it just didn't. It was a letdown, and it was very sad, and you know, you don't want to hope anymore, and but I felt absolutely fucked, and that's all that I can say. And I'm sorry if I'm using that kind of language, but you don't go to take your life in any other way than you feel everything that you've tried is utterly hopeless. It just doesn't get you anywhere. It's like quicksand. And it was the solution to the problem that I'd got. And there's not, I mean, this is 2004, and there's much more knowledge out there. There wasn't the internet back then. You had leaflets and pamphlets and whatever. I hadn't found Alex's book then. It was 2004. And my dad had died, Ashley had died, my sister's boyfriend, my grandpa had died, and it was in my head, and I just went, you know what, I've had enough. You know, when I was 30, I imagined I might have a world record, a couple of gold medals, and here I was, this guy limping around, attempting to make a living as much as I could. I'd been flexible enough to come out from doing something using my intelligence, working in management, using my qualifications, and I was basically doing a working class job, getting by on a couple of £100 a week, and crossing my fingers each week that the weather would be good enough so I'd be able to earn another couple of £100 the next week, so I could pay for my little flat, I could buy food, and I could even have a little pot of money that would go into doing therapy. And the voice just went, just end it, just end it, just end it, end all this nonsense. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I couldn't stand any more the pain and suffering in my body, and I couldn't stand the pain and suffering that was in the world. I hated life. I hated God, whatever that was at the time. I hated my place in the world. I just had enough. And I didn't tell anybody, because the cries for help we were all in my late teens and maybe some part of my early 20s. But I knew I was pretty much on my own, and you've got to resolve this. And you can't. And no one was telling me. I think that it was like, you've just got to manage your health for the rest of your life. Fuck off. I'm not managing anything for the rest of my life. I'm either getting completely well again, or I'm not going to be here. I wasn't going to accept some middle ground, and that is part of the personality that does get chronic fatigue syndrome. Not always, but the high achievers award, or the kind of the inflexible ones, or it's there is a certain amount of that personality type that does get ill, and I apologise for my language, but it was it was that simple. It's all or nothing, and I wasn't willing to compromise and just manage my health for the rest of my life. No effing way. No way. So my last meal was Haagen-Dazs and a really nice bottle of single malt Talisker whiskey, washed down with I had half a bottle of that. It's actually very, very difficult to drink a whole bottle of whiskey. I managed half a bottle of that, which, goodness me, I mean, how much is that? It's like a pint. And then I had a quarter of a bottle of organic gin that was still left in the cupboard with 16 sleeping tablets. And I wrote, and I have uploaded my reading out my suicide letter. And so I wrote whilst I'd got this in my system. Again, not calling anybody. Well, who are you going to call? Sounds like Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? There was nobody to call anymore. What, I'm going to call my mum? What, I'm going to call the doctors? What, I'm going to call... What? Who? Who am I going to call? Who am I going to go and see next? So it was me and the big G, God, whatever you call that. And I was angry. I call God, or whatever, universe, life. I'm spiritual in my beliefs. I'm not religious. Although I accept and actually love nearly all of the world's religions I've looked in. They've all got very beautiful parts of them. And if you correlate that with the Enneagram, which is something that I use, it'll kind of make sense. But at that time, it was... I'm going home, and I've got to say it's an incredibly empowering feeling to take control of your life in that way. And I felt like I was going to control the illness. I'm actually born the same day as Robin Williams, the comedian and actor, late Cancerian. And I believe he developed some kind of Parkinson's disease, and when he took his life, it was his wife has actually come out and said that was her belief that he was attempting to take back control, so I can understand that. Why am I still here then? I wrote many, many, many pages with a big black felt pen, and it was taking more and more effect on me, and the alcohol and the sleeping tablets, and I got deeper and deeper and deeper and further and further and further into like being angry at God and life, and then actually apologizing and saying, I'm coming home, you know, and I love you, because there was this feeling of like, my God, what if I'm doomed? There was that part of the belief of, what if I'm doomed by this? What if I get in major trouble with God for killing myself? Even though I was incredibly angry when I started writing. And what happened was, well, what I'm aware of and what I believe is that I cracked open my higher self. And that is a part of us that knows what to do for the highest and best. And that, it was a voice that cracked in. And I've had religious people who've come and told me that was the voice of God. Well, yes, it is. To some extent it is. And that's within every human being. It's an awareness or an intelligence that is almost like we could say that God self. It's a part of us that knows the highest and best for us, and it's not concerned with our survival. It's just concerned with, you're a soul and you have a path, and you're on it, and it's there to guide you. And I'm very connected with that much more to these days. But basically, there's this voice came in, and it just went, "You haven't done everything yet." And it was very sober, it was very loud, and it almost felt like it was in the room. It was, you know, I didn't turn around. I mean, Neil Donald Walsh has said, who's also an Enneagram type 6, I've worked out like I am, who heard that voice, and he wrote the book Conversations with God. And please, if you're listening to this and thinking I'm going to go on and on about religion, I'm not. It's just, you know, when you're suicidal, the G word comes up. And because it does, and I try to rationalise with this voice, which was not having any of that nonsense, and it was absolutely firm. And I was teetering on the edge of going. It felt like I was teetering right on the edge of throwing myself off a building. Really, you know, I was getting more and more tired. Really, you know, it was really starting to take effect. And I remember the voice just being persistent. It wasn't anything other than, you haven't done everything yet. Dialogue with it, thinking about it. You haven't done everything yet. It didn't waver, it didn't change. There was no emphasis on emotion. It was strong, it was loving, it was kind, it was wise. It was saying, you haven't done everything yet, Daniel. You haven't done everything. And I'd never heard that before. It was like a part of me that I hadn't got in contact with, because I thought I'd done everything. You know, I'd seen so many people, I'd spent so much money, I'd been let down so many times. And you haven't done everything yet. You haven't done everything yet. And it made me stick my fingers down my throat. And no pills came up anymore. Lots of fluid came up. And I was still in a little bit of this place of, you know what, I'm going to leave this in the hands of whatever. Hands of the angels, hands of God. You know what, and I think I probably was so affected by what had already digested, because no pills came out, which shows that the pills are diluted into the alcohol. Now that must have been a toxic mixture of what I've taken. I mean, rock stars die of drugs by taking, sleeping tablets, and then, you know, as well as having alcohol, and then they don't wake up the next day. Well, I'd had enough to make sure that I definitely wouldn't wake up the next day. And wow, to me, it's still I get bowled over by it every time I go back there. I'm incredibly humbled because I'm here and I'm in the best health of my life. I then took myself to bed, and I woke up the next day 20 hours later. Didn't call anybody. Again, who's to call? I felt relieved. but I also knew that there was other, that it wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't dialogue with that part again. I didn't know I could, that part of myself. I think I probably just felt it was a close call. There was a bit of an inner strength there. I felt lucky, of which I still do to this day, because I just would have been a statistic. Probably not even, I would have been labelled as committed suicide because he was depressed, and I was depressed because I'd got an illness that was incurable and no one was able to help me with it. And I had some water. I don't remember if I ate anything, and I went to bed, and I woke up the next day. I went to my grandfather's funeral. I actually cleaned a house. I went and cleaned a house for an hour, then went back to my remember that house and remember that very house. And I went back to drop my ladders off. I used to leave my ladders at my mum's house, and I left them there. And I saw my sister, and I actually confided to my sister what I'd done, and I said, "Don't tell Mum." And she went and told Mum. Mum's response was sort of like, "You're going to have to go into a psychiatric institution." Well, that was exactly what one of the things that I feared, that I'd either get ill and bedridden with ME and never, ever, ever recover, or I'd be carted off to a psychiatric institution because they believe that there's nothing wrong with me, because there's nothing wrong with me, but I'm saying there's something wrong with me. Well, it must be mad then. And my Nana had been, my father's mother had been in a psychiatric institution in and out of her life. My uncle had been, and his elder brother and his son had been suicidal, and in fact, nearly every single member of my family had been suicidal at one point. So that shows the level of dysfunction and where people were in an emotional place, and maybe why I got ME. Well, definitely, was a contributing factor. Not because people were suicidal, but because that was the level of dysfunction within every single human being. They had so many deep issues that at times they thought the only way out was by taking their life. So I slowly began to reshape my life and reevaluate my life. And one of the things that I hadn't done, the voice that said, "You haven't done everything yet," was I hadn't seen a psychic. And my cousin had actually been to one who was local to him, and I went. It was a risk because I thought, what will she say? Like, you're ill, you're always going to be ill. But there was an intuition, and there was a gut feeling of, I'm okay. She'd actually predicted the initials of his girlfriend, and said where she was, and on the doorstep to work, and got the 3 initials from her 3 names, and it said other things, kind of. I trusted in that, and there was a feeling of, I don't know what it was. It was going to be okay. I played a damn good game of poker with her. I went in there. I didn't give anything away as much as I could. I've actually gone back since listened to it, but I remember her telling me, she knew almost everything about my past. Now, I know you can cold read people, and you can gain all the different bits of information, but she knew lots and lots of things, and she also knew about my health. And then she gave me a vision of my future, which was becoming well. And she said I was very spiritual. Now, I'd had other readings over the years, not that I bought into it really too much, but people who'd always said you're very spiritual. Oh, why can't we just be normal? I want to be able to play the guitar and be in a band and be able to do what other people do, and it's like, no, you're sensitive and you're spiritual. Great. So, but she said, you're going to use this as a strength, and you will end up. She said you're doing something like counselling, but it's not quite counselling, and it's the job that I do now. And the spiritual aspect is the Enneagram. I use that with clients. If you look at this says the The Complete Guide to Psychological and Spiritual Growth for the 9 Personality Types. That was a key thing for me to recover, and I use that with clients to this day, regardless of whether they've got health issues or not. Because, to be honest, I actually treat about only 15% of clients who've got health issues. The majority are just sort of anxiety, depression, addictions, work-life balance, business people. I focused on that. I focused away from health and towards mastering psychology and helping people who already got money who come and see me. I originally started seeing clients for £20 a session, and then £40, and then it was £60. But I started to, for whatever reason, I started to get business clients. When I put my prices up in 2014, I started to just really get business clients. Although I do know for a certain degree, get people who also just come from my 5-session package because they've got whatever going on in their life. But it wasn't so much about health issues. And anyway, a year later, after seeing the psychic, I went and bought. Actually, my elder brother was studying NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, of which I'm a master practitioner of now, and I trained at Alex's clinic doing that. And he, on his reading list for one of the books in NLP, amazingly, because it's not the greatest NLP book, but anyway, it was on his reading list, was this book by Alex Howard, and he sent me the photocopy of the cover of it, and I immediately went out and bought it. I thought he looked a little bit like me. He'd got sideburns and black hair, and anyway, I just was compelled to read it. And I struggled reading at the time because of my eye problem, which I really had, of which I've healed that completely now. I remember reading it in about 3 days, which I'd never be able to do, and I just found it compelling. But it still took me a year to go down and see him. And then I went down and saw him a year later, after I did if you've read that book by Alex, he goes and does, he listens to a lot of Anthony Robbins, he goes and does the Awaken the Power Within seminar, which is where you walk barefoot over hot coals. Well, I went and did that in 2006. And one of the things that I decided in February 2006 when I was doing that, age 31, was, it was all the things of, what you wish to manifest in your life. And one was health. And what's one of the things that you're not doing that could actually help you to become more healthy? And one of the things was, go down and see this guy. And it was a lot of money, and I was terrified of London. I lived in the Midlands, and it was like I was going to have to deal with all of that. But I went, no, I'm a barefoot firewalker. I am going down. And I went down to see him. And when he was doing the stop technique, I remember him saying something like, you could use the stop technique and you could earn a few £1,000s more as a window cleaner. And I said to him, I don't want to be a window cleaner. I've only become a window cleaner part-time because I've got ME. I want to do what you're doing. I just came out of my mouth because I just thought what he was doing was pretty good. I'd always been interested in psychology. There was nothing sort of spiritual about it at the time. I found out about the Enneagram there. And I wasn't attempting to fulfill what was being told to me what had been told to me by the psychic. It was just... because various things she told me about relationships and they didn't manifest. But it was just, I'd always fascinated by psychology, and by that time I was listening to lots of Anthony Robbins, lots of kind of early law of attraction stuff. I was taking a deeper interest into spirituality. I was meditating a lot, and I'd been Christian, then Buddhist, then sort of Taoist, and then sort of more just spiritual being, having a human experience. And then I found myself on the course, because I literally said to him, when are the courses? And I was thrown into doing this, threw myself literally into doing this course, and I paid him a lot of money to do it. But it was an intuition that just went, do it. And I doubted every step of the way, but I did it. And I even said to myself, I'm only doing this in order to make a full recovery. I'm not going to cop out and become a therapist, because I just didn't see it as a proper job. I didn't see it as a real job, a real thing. That was my dad's voice in my head, who'd actually died by that point. But it was doing what I do now as for a living, helping people, wasn't a real job. So I had a lot of resistance, and I felt the C word that rhymes with hunt and shunt for copying out and becoming a therapist and charging people money and just taking their money. People who were ill, people who were depressed, people who were anxious, because I just didn't really believe it worked. And I started to see this change in me over the course of the first year when I studied with him in 2006. I repeated the year in 2007 because you were allowed to. I don't know if he still does that to this day. And I was starting to see clients. I started charging £20 a time. I was still going out and cleaning a few windows, but I managed to find people with issues and started using these techniques on them. And there were other people who had got ME who were doing the courses as well. But and you got sort of a modicum amount of shifts. You know, the symptoms didn't always completely end, but what I learned with stuff with serious disease, and particularly, you know, with ME, is that you're running so much anxiety, so much anxiety that, you know, doing one process or one hypnosis session or one EFT session or one whatever was never going to be enough. And I was led to the belief that, you know, having watched sort of stage hypnosis, that, you know, you could control the unconscious mind by just doing one thing, and I was starting to realise, no, it wasn't that simple. It was a process. It was a process unfolding, really. If you make a fist like this really tight now, and then relax it. I didn't say open it, but just relax it. And then slowly open it. It's not so easy. Slowly do it. Eventually you will be able to do it. If you make the fist and hold it there for 30 seconds, okay, really, really hard, and then relax it and then open it, it will take you a long time. And it's rather like the recovery from ME, the amount of fear, amount of energy and force that goes into sort of, and then when you're starting to get well, it's not a process where sort of like, oh, completely relaxed like that. No, it feels tense. It doesn't feel normal to run a brain that doesn't have that level of anxiety, because it feels like you're putting the portcullis up from your castle and putting the drawbridge out. You know, it's like you've got no defence. Your brain's so used to running so much anxiety all of the time that it just seems ridiculous to do that. And it's a beautiful and terrifying experience when you're healing. You know, you're having all different types of shifts. Anyway, so I started using it on clients, and then I got real clients who, well, when I, the beginning of 2008, I was seeing clients in 2006 and 7, but I started to I had a website that I launched in 2008, and I saw clients then, and they came as a result of the website locally, and my first ever client was a doctor. Can you believe I spent years going to doctors, and then, you know, literally 18 months after I first started training in all of this, the first client that I saw was a stressed out doctor. I don't even remember my second client. I've now seen over 2,000 clients, well over 2,000 clients in that amount of time. And then I started to see more clients in the evening, and again, I wasn't seeing clients with ME, and I just wanted to get away from that. I actually let go of all my friends at the clinic who I trained with slowly. I don't know, it just happened, but I just didn't feel I wanted to be associated with ME anymore. I just wanted to be associated with being well. So I started to hang out with people who were well, and I'd stop talking about my illness. I'd just start talking about my energy, and I'd say, oh, my energy's not so great today, or I would say, oh, my health isn't so great. Energy, health, just keep giving it focus. And it was like shift after shift after shift after shift, and then, my God, I can actually do this, and I couldn't do that before, and I haven't taken steroids for this iritis for years, and my arthritis is not troubling me except when it's really bad in the winter, or my God, I can go for this walk, or I could do that, and I could do the other, and then eventually it's like, well, I'm more of a therapist than a window cleaner, and then I made the transition to becoming an international coach, therapist, and mentor, and people have asked me sort of, well, when did you get better? And it's like saying, how long's a piece of string? There were some days, and I'm going to do another video on this, but there were some days that were better than others, but it's like gradually you just see that you've moved on from where you once were, and, you know, 1 month you might be able to do what you once could, and what you once couldn't, and then, you know, then maybe the next month you have a bit of a setback, but then the following month you're able to do a little bit more. So it's just being able to really gauge year by year the improvement that you made and how you felt. And it was actually on holiday this year when I was with my sister. I said, you know what? I said, I had somebody responded to one of my videos, and I think it was in relation. I think they'd seen the video that I'd done about me recovering from suicidal depression, or making the video about me reading out my suicide note. And I said when I was on holiday with my sister down in Devon in England, I think I'm okay for treating clients with ME. I've got this one client in Austria that's come. I've seen a few over the years. Saw one in Ireland. I think he's doing very well now. He's doing pretty much what I'm doing, except he's much further back. He's about 10 years younger, I believe. Won't give his name away, but if you're watching this, good luck. I do watch you from time to time. And I just said to my sister, I'm ready. I'm ready to treat clients with ME much more than I've ever done before, because I know so much about it. I've got so much knowledge because I trained there. I know about Ashok Gupta's amygdala reprogramming thing, whatever that is called, because I remember doing that back in the day. There are so many other things. There's the Mickle therapy. There's so many different ways of treating it, but effectively you're using unconscious tools on the unconscious mind to get an unconscious change. And, you know, it's not that anybody's making up illness consciously. It's unconscious. Here's a book from the United States that I use almost with every client who's got serious disease. $129. This is every illness. It's not just ME. This is every illness. Every illness. And it talks about what's going on at an unconscious level, right? A to Z. A to Z. You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Sadly just passed away, age 90, but healed herself of cancer. Look up every illness here. It gives you a diagnosis of what, here we are, varicose veins, vulva, wrist, and it tells you what's going on. There's another book here, The Body Mind Workbook. Got that all the way back in 2006. Again, you look at every illness there: migraine headaches, mouth, multiple sclerosis, muscles, indigestion, infection, inflammation, impotence, immune system, diarrhea, dislocation, deafness, depression, colitis, cataract, cerebral palsy, bunions, bulimia. It's all here, and it's basically you're using these tools that I'm qualified in, which are unconscious tools. You're using them on the unconscious mind at an unconscious level, and you don't have to be in hypnosis to do it. But yeah, I use NLP, I use hypnosis, I use an abundance of tools that I don't even market out there because people just wouldn't know what they are. But they're all as powerful as hypnosis and hypnotherapy. NLP is like a talking therapy that will go on to a deep level. But I use all of this stuff to help people. And if you would like a free consultation with me, I'd be very happy to do that. 20-minute free consultations. I do them all over the world now via Skype. Today I worked in Austria. I did one in Spain, in Mallorca. There's an island off there. I did another one in Germany, and I did one in Canada. And it's amazing. You know, you can use the power of the internet. And my clinic, this is my office. I use my iMac, and I connect with people all over the world. So I've got an abundance of videos out there. You can go and have a look at my suicide note to correlate that. You'll see me crying all over the place and getting angry in that. I apologise for my language, but it's the only way that perhaps I can get over just how angry and desperate I was and where I once was. So I invite you to look at my website, to look at all my videos, and if you feel that I could help you, if just one session or a package of sessions over the course of a number of months, number of years even. It's not a race to get better, but I have learned an abundance of tools. I've learned so many things that work, and I know what works and what doesn't work, and I've got all of this experience from having worked with clients all over the planet. And I invite you to get in contact with me. Feel free to leave messages in this below this video, and I will do my best to get back with comments. But I'm here, 20 minutes, come and have a chat. Come and have a chat. You'll have to schedule it because I do get busy. So email me and we'll work out a time when it's good for us both. All the best.